guns! Attack! Forward!
Two armies. Two empires. Two military systems so different from each other that they almost cannot be compared. One built its power on discipline. On the unbreakable formation. The synchronized advance. The controlled violence of men who fight as a single organism rather than as individuals. The other built its power on movement. On the feigned retreat. The encirclement. The arrow loosed from a full gallop at 300 yards that finds the gap between a man's helmet and his armor. The Roman legion. The Mongol Cavalry. Two of the most lethal military forces in human history. Who never met each other in battle. This is not a simple question. Anyone who tells you it is hasn't studied either army. Before we can answer who wins, we need to understand exactly what we're asking to win. The Roman legion at its peak, let us place it at approximately 100 AD, under Emperor Trajan, when Rome's military was at its most refined, was not simply a large collection of soldiers. It was a system. A Roman legion at full strength contained approximately 5,000 to 6,000 men. But the number is almost the least important fact about it. Every Roman soldier, every legionary, was required to be able to march 20 miles a day in full kit, dig a fortified camp at the end of that march, build a bridge across a river if ordered, operate siege equipment, and then fight a battle. The Roman army did not just fight wars. It built the infrastructure of military dominance everywhere it went. The pilum was one of the most sophisticated weapons of the ancient world. Thrown at the moment of contact, it was designed not just to wound, but to disable the enemy's shield. The soft iron shank bent on impact, making the pilum impossible to remove quickly, turning a man's own shield into a liability. And then the legionaries closed. With the gladius. With the shield edge. In the scrum that Rome had spent 500 years perfecting. The close-quarters press where Roman discipline, Roman training, and Roman formation gave its soldiers an almost insurmountable advantage. The testudo, the tortoise formation. Shields locked overhead and on all sides. A unit of men becoming, effectively, an armored vehicle. The Roman army had solutions for almost everything. Almost. The Roman legion's consistent vulnerability across its history was this. Its flanks. The legion was built for the controlled frontal engagement, the advance, the press, the grind. Its flanks required protection from allied cavalry or auxiliary forces. When those protections failed, Rome lost. At Cannae in 216 BC, Hannibal used cavalry to encircle a Roman army of perhaps 80,000 men. It became the most studied military defeat in history. Roman generals read about it, studied it, tried to prevent it from happening again. Now imagine an enemy whose entire military philosophy, whose entire reason for existing, was the encirclement that Cannae represented. The Mongol warrior was not trained to fight. He was raised to fight. A Mongol warrior of the 13th century, let us place our comparison at the height of the empire under Genghis Khan and his immediate successors, had been on horseback for essentially his entire life. He could shoot a composite bow accurately from a full gallop. He could cover 100 miles in a day by rotating between multiple horses. He could live for weeks on dried meat, blood tapped from his horses, and whatever the land provided, with no supply line, no logistical tail, no camp followers. The Mongol composite bow was the most sophisticated ranged weapon of the medieval world. Shorter than the English longbow, designed to be used from horseback, but comparable in power and significantly greater in accuracy while mounted. At full gallop, moving away from an enemy, a Mongol horse archer could turn in the saddle and release accurately at 200 yards. The Romans had a name for this technique when they encountered it from the Parthians, a people related to the same steppe tradition as the Mongols. They had no tactical solution for it. But the bow was only part of it. The Mongols' most lethal tactical weapon was not their bow. It was their discipline in appearing to have none. The feigned retreat. An entire cavalry force riding away, apparently in panic, drawing the enemy forward, out of formation, into pursuit. And then wheeling. The feigned retreat required extraordinary discipline and coordination, more, arguably, than the Roman advance. Because the instinct of a soldier ordered to run from an enemy is to actually run. The Mongols had trained the instinct out of their men. They retreated in perfect order, just fast enough to draw pursuit, slow enough to maintain cohesion. And returned with mathematical precision. Between 1206 and 1260 AD, the Mongol Empire conquered more territory in a shorter time than any military force in history. China, Central Asia, Persia, the Middle East, Eastern Europe. Every military tradition they encountered. Every tactical system developed by every civilization they fought. They were not invincible. At Ain Jalut in 1260, the Egyptian Mamluks, themselves a cavalry force of extraordinary capability, defeated a Mongol army using the feigned retreat against its inventors. The Mongols could be beaten. But it took soldiers who understood their tactics from the inside. The Romans did not have that advantage. They had never seen anything like the Mongols. But the Mongols had never seen anything like the Romans either. Let us now do what history never allowed these two forces to do. Let us put them on the same field. And let us be honest about what happens. The Romans deploy first. Their instinct, developed across 5 centuries of warfare, is the controlled advance. Form the battle line. Protect the flanks. Close the distance. Get into the press where Roman discipline and Roman weapons dominate. This is exactly what the Mongols want. The Mongols do not close. They maintain distance. They maintain the distance at which their composite bows are effective and Roman pila are useless. 200 yards. 250 yards. Just beyond the range of any weapon the Romans can throw. And then the arrows begin. The Roman testudo is an extraordinary defensive formation. But it has a fundamental limitation. An army in testudo is not advancing. It is surviving. The Mongols do not need to defeat the testudo. They need to wait for it. Wait for the gaps. Wait for a soldier to lower his shield for a moment. Wait for fatigue. Because men cannot hold shields above their heads indefinitely. And wait for the flanks. The Mongol flanking force circles wide. Wider than any cavalry the Romans have faced in their centuries of warfare. They appear at the flanks, then the rear. The Roman formation, designed for the frontal engagement, must now face threats from 3 directions simultaneously. This is canny. Exactly canny. The Roman military's worst nightmare. Enacted by cavalry that moves faster than any Roman commander can respond to. But wait. Because we are not being fair to the Romans. We have placed them in the Mongols' ideal scenario. Open ground, no preparation time, the cavalry battle at which the Mongols are without peer in human history. The Romans never fought like this by choice. A Roman army in the field built a fortified camp every single night. In approximately 4 hours. A ditch. A rampart. Sharpened stakes. Organized gate positions with pre-planned defensive sectors. Against Mongol cavalry, which could not effectively assault fixed fortifications without siege equipment they rarely carried. This changes the equation entirely. Against a Roman army in a fortified camp. The Mongols' primary weapon, the mobile arrow storm, is dramatically reduced in effectiveness. The Romans, behind their ramparts, can return fire with their own archers and artillery. And the Roman artillery. The Scorpio. The ballista. The onager. Roman artillery that could reach ranges comparable to the composite bow, and with projectiles that no shield, no horse, no Mongol armor could stop. Now we have a different battle. The honest answer to who wins, the answer that respects both of these extraordinary military forces, is that it depends. Not as a cop-out. As a military reality. Scenario 1. Open field. No preparation time. The Mongols choose when and where to engage. The Mongols win. Decisively. The Roman formation, however disciplined, cannot close the distance to use its close-quarters superiority. The feigned retreat draws the Romans forward, breaks cohesion, and the encirclement completes the work. This is what the Mongols did to every heavy infantry force they faced. The Polish knights at the Battle of Legnica in 1241. The Hungarian army at the Battle of Mohi in 1241, an army that included heavy cavalry, archers, and infantry in combination. Both destroyed in the open field by tactics the Romans would have recognized as the nightmare scenario of Cannae. Scenario 2. The Romans have preparation time. They choose their ground. They fortify. The Romans win. Or more precisely, the Mongols cannot win. The Mongol cavalry, without siege equipment, cannot assault prepared Roman fortifications effectively. The Roman artillery neutralizes the distance advantage of the composite bow. The Romans, behind their ramparts, can sustain the arrow storm that destroys them in the open. And if the Mongols attempt to force an entry, they are channeled into the gates, into Roman killing grounds, into the close-quarters press where Roman discipline is absolute. Scenario 3. Extended campaign. Multiple engagements over weeks or months. This is where it gets genuinely complicated. In an extended campaign, the Mongols' logistical model, requiring almost no supply infrastructure, gives them a mobility advantage that the Romans cannot match. A Mongol force can appear where no army should be able to appear, because it has not been constrained by the roads and supply lines that dictate Roman movement. But the Romans' logistical sophistication, their ability to build, to sustain, to organize, means that over time, in territory they control, they can establish the infrastructure of dominance. Roads. Forts. Supply depots. The slow, grinding reorganization of conquered territory that makes retreat and harassment increasingly difficult. The Mongols were extraordinary at destroying. The Romans were extraordinary at building what they destroyed. In an extended campaign, this becomes a race between Mongol speed and Roman permanence. And history suggests, based on what eventually stopped the Mongols, that permanence eventually wins. But it takes generations. So who wins? In the open field, at the Mongols' chosen time and place. The Mongols win. Not because Roman soldiers are less brave or less skilled, but because the Mongol system was specifically optimized for the scenario that destroys heavy infantry. Speed. Distance. Encirclement. Attrition from range. The Romans had no answer for an enemy that refused to close, and the Mongols were disciplined enough to never close unless they chose to. In a prepared position, on Roman terms, on Roman ground, the Romans win. The Mongols' primary tactical advantage, the mobile arrow storm, is significantly neutralized by fortification. The Roman artillery extends Rome's effective range. And any Mongol attempt to force a fortified position plays directly into Roman close-quarters strength. And in an extended campaign, it depends on which side makes fewer mistakes. The Mongols' speed and logistical freedom give them enormous initiative. The Romans' engineering and organizational capacity give them enormous resilience. But here is the verdict that matters more than the tactical one. The Roman legion and the Mongol cavalry were not just military forces. They were expressions of civilizational philosophy. Rome said, "We will build our power into the land itself." Roads, walls, cities, law, the infrastructure of permanence that outlasts any army. The Mongols said, "We will be faster than any permanent power can respond to. Our weapon is movement itself, the speed that makes every fixed defense obsolete, every supply line vulnerable, every assumption about where we will strike next wrong." Both philosophies conquered half the known world. Both philosophies eventually failed. Rome fell to the pressure of peoples who had learned, over centuries, to fight the way Rome fought, and to use Rome's own internal divisions against it. The Mongol Empire fragmented within a century of its peak, its speed and reach making it impossible to administer as a unified political entity once the energy of conquest was spent. The greatest military force in history is not the one that wins every battle. It is the one that solves the problem in front of it, consistently, adaptively, across changing circumstances. By that measure, both of these armies deserve to be called the greatest. Which is exactly why the question of who would win between them has no simple answer. And exactly why we're still asking it. We ask, who would win, because we want a simple answer. We want to know which system was better. Which philosophy was correct. Which civilization had figured out the thing that the other hadn't. But the honest answer, the one that respects both of these extraordinary human achievements, is that they were solving different problems. Rome was solving the problem of permanent power. How to hold territory indefinitely. How to make conquest stick. How to build institutions that outlast the individuals who created them. The Mongols were solving the problem of overwhelming force. How to project power faster than anyone can respond. How to remain perpetually mobile in a world that rewards the side that strikes first and retreats before the counterattack arrives. Rome's roads are still there. 2,000 years later, archaeologists find them under modern highways. The infrastructure of Roman military dominance outlasted the army that built it by 15 centuries. The Mongolian steppe is still there. Still producing the horsemen. Still vast. Still open. The landscape that made the Mongols possible has not changed. Here is the warning that both armies carry for the modern world. Every military force in history has been defeated. Not by an enemy that was simply stronger, but by an enemy that had found a way to make its strengths irrelevant. The Mongols never solved the problem of fixed fortification. They could ride around it. They could besiege it when they had siege equipment. But they could never develop the engineering culture that Rome had spent centuries perfecting. Rome never solved the problem of mobility. It built its power on roads, and roads are a vulnerability as much as an asset. An enemy that doesn't use roads cannot be predicted by them. Every system has its canny waiting for it. The scenario it wasn't designed for. The enemy that refuses to fight the way it was built to win. The Roman legion was the greatest heavy infantry force in human history. The Mongol cavalry was the greatest mobile cavalry force in human history. Put them against each other in the right conditions, and either one wins. But here is the question that neither army could answer. What do you do when the world changes? And the problem you were built to solve is no longer the problem you face? Both armies eventually found out. Every army does.